Welcome back to Chicago Independent Television. The 2016 Summer Olympics were awarded to Rio de Janeiro, but Chicago submitted an unsuccessful bid for the Games. In this segment, we'll learn more about that bid, what it would have meant for Chicago, and how Chicago activists worked furiously to block it.
You can fight City Hall. You can make a difference. And it's good to learn about recent examples of people fighting and making a difference, as in Chicago over the Olympics. Everyone knows that Chicago submitted a high-profile bid for the 2016 Summer Olympic Games, and everyone knows what the result of that bid was.
The city of Chicago, having obtained the least number of votes, will not participate in the next round.
But what's far less well known is the role played by a small number of volunteer citizens groups in Chicago who publicly opposed the bid and organized to block the Olympics. There were lots of good reasons to oppose a bid for the Olympics. Cities that host the Olympics tend to accumulate cost overruns that take decades to pay off. Montreal spent 30 years paying off the debt as a result of the 1976 Summer Olympics. Athens went more than 1,000% over budget in costs for the 2004 Summer Olympics. Vancouver, in its bid to host the 2010 Winter Olympics, submitted a budget of $1 billion, which ballooned to more than 6 times that amount by the time the Olympics were actually held. London submitted a $3.6 billion budget for the 2012 Olympics that has grown to $14 billion and climbing. Chicago was already mired in a $655 million budget shortfall at the time of the Chicago 2016 bid, and simply could not afford a project that would drain billions more dollars from taxpayers. The Chicago political establishment, long a bulwark of corruption and incompetence, could well botch the construction of the Olympics venues yet to be built, including a proposed Olympic stadium on Chicago's South Side. What's more, Chicago's infrastructure, including its roads and its mass transit, is already crumbling and may well buckle under the strain of 1 million new visitors as a result of the Olympics. But the Chicago establishment had good reason to support the Olympics. It did not want to risk the wrath of the champion of the Chicago 2016 bid, Chicago Mayor Richard M. Daley. Daley did everything he could do in his considerable power to bolster support, including using strong-arm tactics against Chicago's business and philanthropic communities to raise $90 million for the bid, in the midst of a recession no less. Many civic leaders privately confided to activists organizing against the bid that they thought that the Olympic bid would be bad for Chicago, but did not dare speak up out of fear of losing city business or city contracts or facing more outright reprisals. And the Chicago 2016 bid was the mayor's most cherished project. The Chicago 2016 bid committee was stacked with mayoral sycophants. The committee president, Lori Healy, previously served as Mayor Daley's chief of staff. Meanwhile, Daley all but abandoned running the city for 2 years pursuing the Olympics, while deficits grew, schools and public housing decayed, and kids in Chicago streets were getting shot. The Chicago corporate media served as an echo chamber for the bid, with hardly any exceptions. Among the few journalists who did speak out, Ben Joravsky of the Chicago Reader, whose weekly column poked holes in the case for the Olympics. Plus, community groups and activists who saw through the smokescreen organized against the bid. The Unlimpic Organizing Committee held events across Chicago to raise critical awareness. Arguably, the leading group against the Chicago 2016 bid was No Game Chicago, which had realized that the focus to oppose the bid was not in Chicago, but was rather with the then-sitting 111 members of the International Olympic Committee, which would meet in Copenhagen in October 2009 to vote on the Olympics. No Game Chicago, despite having no money, no office, and no telephone, did organize rallies against the Olympics during Olympic Committee visits to Chicago, dogged the city of Chicago during a series of spurious town halls only 2 months before the IOC vote, assembled a book of evidence which it provided in person at the Olympics headquarters in Lausanne, Switzerland, and reinforced that message again in Copenhagen on the eve of the final vote. Meanwhile, everyday Chicagoans grew skeptical of the Chicago 2016 bid. Surveys of Chicagoans saw public support of the bid sink below 50%. That mattered because, to quote one senior Olympic strategist who confided to No Game Chicago, quote, "Once the public support for a bid falls below 50%, you're toast," unquote. It's arguable that the efforts of No Game Chicago made the difference. When Chicago was eliminated in the first round of voting, a mere 4 votes separated the bottom 2 cities, Chicago and Tokyo. Had those votes switched, Tokyo would have been eliminated first rather than Chicago. Madrid could well be eliminated in the next round, since a proposed Madrid Olympics would come right after consecutive Olympics in Europe. And with Chicago in a head-to-head final against Rio, anything could have happened. But it didn't.
We know for a fact that we made a difference. It's not speculation. We do have it on very good authority that the IOC knew who we were, and they respected us, and they listened to us.
There are 2 lessons to be learned here. One is, as mentioned earlier, you can fight City Hall. Indeed, you can fight and win against the entirety of the establishment, as No Game Chicago and the anti-Olympics efforts in Chicago showed, if your cause is just, if you do your homework, and if your strategy is sound. Lesson number 2. The activism that you do today can have other unexpected positive consequences down the road. As an unexpected side effect of its effort to successfully block the Chicago Olympics, the anti-Olympic Chicago movement wound up doing what nobody else did in more than 2 decades. It effectively ousted Richard Daley from the mayor's office.
But he had no plan B for economic development of the city of Chicago. The Olympics was his whole ball of wax. He shot everything at the Olympics. When he lost that, he had no alternatives to offer the people, so I knew he wouldn't run again.
Throughout this great city, in every neighborhood, on every block, there are people who give unselfishly, unbending in their determination, bold in the belief that they can make a difference, and they have.
A large explosion.
Roger. We need more troops, more helicopters, more satellites, more predator drones.